My own child called me trash and threw me out of the only home I had left. At T69, with nowhere to go, I believed my life was over. But a dusty road and a bag of discarded rags held a secret that would rewrite my past and return everything I had lost. My name is Eleanor. The day my son, David, told me to leave was the day the world lost all its color. The shouting had become a constant shadow in that house. But this time, his words were final. "You're a burden," he said, his voice like ice. "I'm tired of your frailty. I want you out of my house." He pointed to the door, and the gesture felt like a physical blow. I trembled, a dry leaf in a storm, unable to believe these words came from the boy I raised, the man I had sacrificed everything for. But beneath the shock was a familiar, cold dread. My life had been a series of silent goodbyes. First, the love of my life, William, vanishing without explanation. Then, the whispered lie that my newborn daughter had not survived. David was my last anchor, and I had clung to tightly. Now I saw that my love had been seen only as a weight, with my vision blurred by tears. I tried to speak, to ask why, but the words crumbled into a broken murmur. David stood firm, an impenetrable wall of resentment. He took a step closer, his hand pushing the door open wider, hurrying my exit. I bent down slowly, my bones protesting, and picked up the small bag I had secretly packed for a disaster I never truly believed would come. Inside were a few dresses, a simple cross necklace, a faded photograph of David as a smiling boy, and a wool shawl I had knitted years ago. My trembling fingers traced the shawl's pattern, seeking a comfort my son could no longer provide. I stood and looked into his eyes, searching for any trace of the child I once held. I found only the cold stare of a stranger. I wanted to tell him of the nights I watched over his fevers, the meals I skipped so his plate could be full, the winters I gave him my coat. But the lump in my throat strangled the words. "Leave, now," he repeated, his tone harsher. I moved toward the door, each step an agony. As I crossed the threshold, I turned for one last look at the life I was leaving behind. The walls, the table, the empty chairs, they had witnessed a lifetime of my devotion. Then, a profound emptiness enveloped me. David slammed the door. The sound was a thunderclap that sealed my fate, echoing in my chest like a final, painful heartbeat. Left outside, I stood motionless. The evening chill bit through my thin dress. I clutched my bag to my chest, this small bundle now the only link to my former life. I looked at the dusty ground, took a shuddering breath, and began to walk. Every step hurt my tired knees and my wounded heart. My hunched back made me feel smaller than I was. Yet, inside, a tiny, stubborn flame refused to be extinguished. I looked back one last time at the house silhouetted against the reddish evening sky. I wondered if I would ever hear my son's laugh again, the pure, joyful sound from his childhood. Hope and sadness twisted together in my chest. I pressed my lips together, holding back a sob, and continued down the dirt path with no destination, tears tracing the wrinkles on my face. The road was long, the dust rising under my worn-out shoes. I thought life had been unfair many times, but I never imagined the deepest wound would come from the one who should have loved me most. Suddenly, my foot caught on something soft lying at the roadside. I stumbled, stopping to see what it was. A dirty, stained cloth bag, abandoned and forgotten. It looked like worthless trash, but something inside me, an intuition I had learned to trust over a lifetime, whispered that I should open it. With effort, I bent down, untied the loose knot, and looked inside. With trembling fingers, I reached into the dirty bag and pulled out what looked like discarded rags. There were torn trousers, worn through socks, garments that someone had thrown away without a second thought. Just as I was about to push it all aside, my fingers brushed against something, different, a firmness hidden within the fabric of a thick cotton shirt. The shirt was well worn, with loose buttons and a frayed collar, but as I inspected it more closely, I noticed something peculiar. The inside hem was sewn with a different colored thread, newer than the rest of the garment. My heart quickened its pace. There was something concealed within those stitches. Fighting the tremor in my hands, I carefully picked at the threads until one came loose, then another, and then a small, folded piece of paper yellowed with age fell into my lap. I picked it up delicately, as if handling a precious relic. The paper fell rough beneath my fingertips, and my breath caught in my throat. It was as if fate itself had placed this message in my hands at the most unexpected moment. I unfolded it slowly, my eyes scanning the firm, handwritten words. A shiver ran down my spine as I read the brief message. The letter said that if it ever reached her hands, she must search in Millfield for what had been taken from her, because there she would find her truth. The name of the town hit me like a physical blow. Millfield, it was the place where my heartbreak had begun. The town I had fled in shame after William vanished. The town where I had given birth in a cold, clinical hospital, only to be told my baby girl had not survived. For 40 years, I had never spoken its name aloud, and now this dirty piece of paper was commanding me to return to the very source of my deepest pain. Sometimes the path forward begins with returning to where you began. I sat there frozen, the page trembling between my fingers. Millfield, the one place on earth I had vowed never to see again. How could this be happening? Here I was, cast out by my own son, sitting on a dusty roadside, holding a message that pointed directly to my most painful memories. Was this a cruel joke? It made no sense, yet deep in my heart, I felt this message had purpose. Who could have written it? Why was it hidden in a forgotten shirt? And most importantly, what had been taken from me that I needed to find in Millfield? My mind filled with questions as the air grew thick around me. I pressed the letter to my chest and looked toward the horizon where the sky was beginning to tinge with orange sunset hues. In that instant, I remembered David's contemptuous words when he threw me out, and I felt that perhaps this letter was the answer I needed to keep from being completely defeated. I can't ignore this sign, I whispered to myself. Perhaps fate is offering me a second chance, and I must follow it, even if it costs me the little strength I have left. Tears streamed down my cheeks, but they weren't just tears of pain. There was a spark of hope in them too, the first I'd felt in years. I slowly got up, tucking the letter safely inside my shawl to protect it. My body was tired, but my eyes now shone with renewed determination. I picked up my bag and began walking again, repeating the words I had read to myself as if they were a mantra giving me energy. Maybe this trip to Millfield would reveal a secret hidden since my youth, something that had marked my destiny without my knowing it. The silence of the evening accompanied my thoughts as I walked. With every step, I told myself that nothing could be a coincidence, that the bag in the middle of the road, that shirt with different stitching, couldn't be mere chance. There was a plan, an invisible thread guiding me toward a different future than I had imagined. Though fear weighed me down, hope pushed me forward. Thus, with the letter tucked away like the most valuable treasure I had ever found, I continued my march. The dust from the road rose behind my steps as the sky darkened slowly, with my heart battered by my son's betrayal but illuminated by a spark of faith. I knew nothing would ever be the same. That yellowed page hidden in dirty clothes was not just any paper. It was the key that would unlock a hidden past and forever change the course of my life. The sun had set behind the hills, and twilight turned the road into an endless ribbon of dirt. I walked slowly with clumsy steps, but in my eyes there was a different glint, a light that came not from lost youth or stolen health, but from that letter I kept carefully against my chest. I felt there was a promise within those written words, and although I didn't fully understand their meaning, I was convinced I had to obey that silent voice telling me to go to Millfield. Perhaps an answer awaited me there, an answer to so many silences, so many lonely nights wondering why life had been so cruel. My body was tired, my knees ached, and my hunched back reminded me I was no longer young. But inside me, something stronger than pain was beginning to grow, a new impulse forcing me to continue, a whisper saying that not all was lost yet. As I walked, the cool evening air grew colder, and I realized I couldn't walk forever on these aimless paths. I had to find a town, a friendly voice to tell me how to get to Millfield. After hours of walking with slow steps and constant pauses to catch my breath, I finally spotted the welcoming lights of a small hamlet in the distance. There were just a few houses with low roofs, and in the center stood a small chapel, its steeple seeming to wait for a call that never came. When I entered the town, the silence of the night was broken by the crunching of my shoes on the dirt and the barking of a dog watching me from a fenced yard. I walked toward what passed for a town square, just a wide patch of ground with worn iron benches, and there I found a couple of men sitting, talking in low voices. They looked at me with surprise, like someone seeing an unexpected apparition in a place where strangers rarely came. In a soft but firm voice, I asked them the question that would determine my future. "Could you tell me how to get to Millfield?" The men looked at each other with bewilderment. The older one, his face weathered by sun and time, replied with concern in his voice, "Ma'am, what's an elderly woman doing traveling alone at this hour? The road to Millfield is long and seldom traveled. It's not safe." The younger man, with the same cautious expression, added, "It's unusual to see women of your age wandering at night. You must have a powerful reason to undertake such a journey." I lowered my gaze for a moment, hesitating whether to reveal the secret I held close to my heart. But something about their genuine concern made me trust them. "There's something in Millfield that belongs to me," I said, my voice gaining strength. "Something that was taken from me many years ago, and the time has come to reclaim it." The men fell silent, surprised by the firmness in my words. Though they didn't fully understand, they felt respect for the determination shining in my eyes. The locals began to murmur among themselves. Others who had heard voices from their homes came out discreetly, and soon a small crowd of curious onlookers formed around me. There were women in flower-stained aprons, barefoot children hiding behind their mothers' skirts, and tired men returning from a day's work in the fields. They all looked at me with a mixture of strangeness and compassion. A frail old woman walking alone on a dark road, asking directions to a distant city, was not a common sight. The older man spoke again. "The road to Millfield is arduous. You'd have to cross valleys and dusty routes. You can't just walk aimlessly. You need proper transportation, perhaps companions." I nodded slowly, understanding the difficulty, but didn't hesitate to affirm my resolve. "I'm prepared for whatever is necessary. No fatigue or risk will stop me. Life has already hit me hard enough, and the only thing left is to obey fate." A woman from the town, moved by my strength, approached and offered me fresh water in a mason jar. I took it with both hands and drank slowly, thanking her with a smile that showed both gratitude and fatigue. "I've come from far away," I explained. "My son threw me out of his house, and I walked aimlessly until I stumbled upon a bag of dirty clothes on the road." The murmuring among the crowd intensified as everyone listened intently. "Inside that bag," I continued, "I found a letter with a clear message. I must search in Millfield for what was taken from me." As I spoke these words, my eyes moistened, and the crowd fell respectfully silent as if witnessing a sacred revelation. In our darkest hours, sometimes strangers become our guiding stars. For the first time in many years, I felt a spark of hope light up in my heart. I was not alone. Even though I knew no one in this place, I felt that people were listening and understanding me. The older man looked at the women who had gathered. "She cannot walk to Millfield," he said, his voice firm. "It's too far for anyone, let alone on foot." The woman who had given me water nodded. "My cousin drives his truck to the market in Millfield every morning before dawn. You can rest in the chapel, and we will wake you. He can take you." I felt a surge of gratitude so strong it brought fresh tears. These strangers who owed me nothing were offering the help my own son had denied. I accepted with a heart full of emotion. I spent a few hours on a hard wooden pew in the small chapel, the letter pressed to my heart as if fearing the wind would take it, or that fate would once again snatch the truth I was just beginning to grasp. Before the first light of dawn, a gentle shake woke me from my restless sleep. The woman from the previous night helped me onto her cousin's truck, and the long, bumpy ride began. Each mile rattled my aging bones but strengthened my resolve. The truck arrived at the outskirts of Millfield as the last stars faded from the morning sky. The driver helped me down near the city center. The exhaustion was reflected in every step I took. My body seemed to want to give up, but my spirit pushed forward, driven by that letter hidden in my shawl, the message that had transformed my life in a matter of days. The city with its timid morning lights received me like a stranger returning from the past. As I walked through cobblestone streets, I noticed the smells of burning wood, fresh baked bread, and damp dust, all mixing with the murmur of distant voices. My tired eyes searched for a place to rest, a corner that offered a roof, even if just for one night. And it was then I spotted a wooden sign hanging crookedly over a rusty iron door. The sign read in faded letters, "The Hope Guest House." I smiled ironically at the name. It seemed to fitting for what I felt in my heart, as if destiny insisted on leaving me signs. I pushed the door with almost childlike effort and entered a small entryway lit by a yellowish bulb that flickered with every gust of wind coming through the cracks. The inside of the guest house was humble, with walls stained by humidity and old furniture that had been polished so many times it no longer shined. However, the place had a special warmth, the kind that doesn't come from wealth, but from hands that strive to maintain a dignified corner in the midst of simplicity. Behind a simple counter, a robust woman in her 50s appeared, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, wearing a flowered apron. The woman looked me up and down, and instead of showing suspicion, she offered a warm smile, like someone who recognizes a life story in another's fatigue. In a firm but welcoming voice, she asked what I needed at this early hour. I replied that I was just looking for a place to sleep, that I had traveled from far away and had been walking for days. The owner frowned, surprised to see an old woman in such a condition, and commented that it wasn't common to receive guests of my age without company. In a thin voice, I explained that I had left my home because I no longer had a place there, and that I was following a sign fate had put in my hands. The woman listened intently, leaning her arms on the counter, and asked what kind of sign it was. Then I, with my eyes shining with restrained emotion, took out the crumpled letter and held it between my fingers. "This is the key to my path," I told her. "Someone asked me to search in Millfield for what had been taken from me, and that's why I'm here, obeying that mysterious order." The guest house owner's eyes widened in amazement, and she invited me to sit in a nearby chair, offering me a glass of cool water. As I drank slowly, feeling my strength gradually return, the woman, whose name was Martha, said she had heard many travelers' stories, but rarely had she felt so much truth in someone's voice. Then she said something that made my heart stop. "I've heard rumors in Millfield of a woman named Catherine, who has been searching for her mother for years, asking in churches, hospitals, and even at the county clerk's office." I set the glass down on the table with a tremor so strong the water spilled a little. My eyes widened in disbelief. Catherine, just hearing the name shook me to my core. After 40 years of silence, could this be the answer the letter promised? "Catherine?" I whispered, the name feeling foreign yet achingly familiar on my lips. What was her name? Martha, the guest house owner, looked at me with gentle understanding. "Catherine," she repeated calmly. "Many in the area have commented on her insistence. She wouldn't give up despite all the obstacles." My heart began to beat so violently I felt it might burst from my chest. It couldn't be a coincidence. It couldn't be that just as I arrived in this town, they would tell me about someone with that name, as if everything had been written beforehand in some invisible book. I covered my face with my hands, murmuring that perhaps this Catherine was the answer to my whole life of silence and pain, that perhaps she was the person I was meant to find. Martha looked at me tenderly. "Destiny sometimes takes its time," she said softly, "but it always finds a way to guide those who persevere." She leaned closer. "If Catherine has been searching for her mother for so long, then the pieces are meant to fit together. You need to prepare yourself. She might be closer than you imagine." I trembled, tears of emotion welling in my eyes. I've been carrying these wounds for nearly 7 decades, I confessed. The thought that someone has been looking for me, it's like a breath of new life. Martha approached and took my hands in hers. You're not alone anymore, she told me firmly. Even though the road has been cruel, you're now facing an answer that could change everything. That night, I stayed in a small room at the guest house with peeling white walls and an iron bed that creaked with every movement. But I didn't mind the discomfort because my mind couldn't stop thinking about the name I had heard. Catherine. I repeated it over and over, savoring a word that somehow brought back my youth. I wondered who this woman was, what her face looked like, what life she had led, and above all, if she could really have any connection to me. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid to sleep. Hope had settled in my heart like a new fire that would keep me warm, even if the world tried to knock me down. That night in that humble guest house in Millfield, I understood that destiny wasn't a straight line but a path full of footprints that, although they seemed scattered, ultimately led to the truth. As the wind gently tapped the windows and the city sank into silence, my soul stirred with the certainty that life was preparing the most important meeting of all, a meeting that would not only return what I had lost, but would show me that even after the most painful betrayal, there was still room for redemption and for love. The dawn in Millfield arrived, with a golden glow that colored the dusty streets and the low roofs of the humble houses. As the first rays of light filtered through the distant hills, I felt that every step brought me closer to a destiny I hadn't imagined. Even in my wildest dreams, I had woken up early after a nearly sleepless night, the name Catherine echoing in my mind like a persistent echo that quickened my pulse, as if it held the key to a mystery I had carried for too many years. Martha served me hot tea with the kindness of someone who understands the body needs warmth to support the soul. Then I set off, asking neighborhood residents if they knew where I could find this woman everyone talked about. They pointed me down a narrow path leading to an area of modest houses built from cinder block with tin roofs that shone under the morning sun. As I advanced, I felt every footstep reverberate in my heart like a drum announcing an outcome. When I arrived in front of one of these simple homes, painted a blue faded by time, I stopped. The house was no different from the others, but something about it gave me a special energy, a premonition that made my skin tingle. I stood silent for a few seconds, breathing deeply, as if gathering the courage for what I was about to do. My trembling hand rose slowly, and I knocked on the wooden door with my knuckles. The dry sound seemed to expand more than usual in the morning quiet. My heart was beating so hard I thought the neighbors could hear it, and my breathing became ragged. As I waited for an answer, the door opened slowly, and on the other side appeared a woman in her 40s with dark brown hair falling in waves over her shoulders, and a deep gaze charged with an intensity that seemed to see right through whoever looked at her. Catherine froze when she saw me standing at her entrance with my faded shawl and my face marked by wrinkles that were the scars of life. For a moment that seemed eternal, we both looked at each other without saying a word, as if something in the air had stolen our voices. It was Catherine who first broke the unbearable silence, and she did it in a way no one could have predicted. Her eyes filled with tears in a matter of seconds, and unable to contain herself, she began to cry with a deep, heart-wrenching sob that came from the very depths of her being. The heart recognizes what the mind refuses to see. I, stunned, took a step back as if this emotional outburst had caught me off guard, but I didn't look away from her. Then I heard Catherine's voice, broken and trembling. She said, "Mother, it's me." Those 3 words cut through the air. I felt my legs go weak and had to lean on the doorframe for support. "No," I whispered, shaking my head, my mind refusing to process the impossible. My daughter is dead. They told me she died." My heart was pounding, a wild, painful rhythm against my ribs. This woman was a stranger. This was a new cruel trick. This was a ghost. But as I looked, truly looked into those deep, searching eyes, I saw my own. I saw the ghost of William. I saw a lifetime of questions. They told me, I repeated, my voice cracking, the words a plea for this not to be real, and at the same time, a desperate prayer that it was. I held your funeral in my heart every year. Catherine, sobbing, reached out a hand but didn't dare touch me. They lied, Mother, she said, her voice breaking. They lied to us both. They lied, 2 words that rewrote an entire lifetime of grief. This was the moment that made the cold road and the years of pain worth it. Catherine, still crying, covered her face with her hands. I was told a different story, she explained. I grew up believing my biological parents had abandoned me, but I always felt an impossible to fill void, an absence that no explanation could soothe. She said she had searched for years, asking in offices and churches, and every clue led to a wall of silence, until she finally heard rumors of a woman named Eleanor who might be the mother she never stopped looking for. The old woman felt her whole body tremble, and tears streamed down her cheeks like an unstoppable river. She put her hands to her chest and murmured that she couldn't believe it, that after so much pain, so many years of carrying guilt and loneliness, fate was placing her in front of her daughter. Life took too much from me, I said, my voice thick with emotion. It ripped away my right to raise you, to watch you grow, to stroke your face when you were a child. But I never stopped thinking about you for a single day. Catherine lunged forward and hugged me with a force that seemed to want to reclaim all the lost decades at once, and I returned the embrace, pressing her against my frail chest, feeling the accumulated pain of a lifetime dissolving in that contact. Our cries mingled in a single breath, and the neighbors passing by on the street stopped to watch, not fully understanding what was happening but recognizing in the scene the magnitude of a reunion that transcended words. Catherine, between sobs, repeated, Mother, Mother, and I replied, my child, child of my soul, as if I needed to say the words over and over to convince myself it was real. For long minutes we remained embraced in the doorway, letting time melt away like sand through fingers, allowing ourselves to feel that life was finally giving back what it had stolen. When we managed to separate a little, though still holding hands, I studied Catherine's face in detail. I saw in her eyes a reflection of my own, in her smile the memory of my youth, and in her skin the testament of a difficult but dignified life. It's like looking in a mirror of the past, I murmured. There's no doubt you're my daughter. No one in the world could convince me otherwise. Catherine nodded, her eyes still swimming with tears. I felt it from the first moment, she replied. I don't need proof or documents because the heart is never wrong. I thought aloud that God or destiny had waited too long to allow us this reunion, but that the lost time didn't matter. The important thing is that we're together now, and nothing and no one can separate us again. Catherine squeezed my hands. I'll never let you go again, she vowed. After so many years of emptiness, all I want is to rebuild our bond, to live whatever time we have left as mother and daughter. I smiled through my tears. Yes, I whispered. There's still time to love each other, to share what the lies stole from us. And so in that simple house in Millfield, under the discreet gaze of a sky that seemed to lean in to witness the miracle, a mother and daughter who had been separated by deceit and destiny recognized each other, embraced, and spoke the words that gave them back their lives. The air inside the house became thick and vibrant after our embrace. Catherine led me to the living room table, simple, light wood with marks from use. On it was a pile of scattered photographs, memories she had treasured in silence, as proof that although she didn't know her roots, she had built a life worth telling. Gently, Catherine picked up a photograph and placed it in front of me. It showed her as a child with messy braids and a shy smile taken in a schoolyard. I always felt that smile hid something, she said softly, a kind of childhood nostalgia I couldn't explain, as if even as a little girl, I knew I was missing an essential part. I caressed the photo with trembling fingers. I see you and recognize you, I murmured. This is the child I dreamed of night after night, the daughter I imagined at every missed birthday. Every Christmas where the emptiness held me tighter than loneliness. Catherine continued showing images. One showed her as a teenager in a high school uniform, holding a notebook to her chest and looking at the camera with a serious expression. That was a difficult time, she explained. My teenage rebellion mixed with the anguish of not knowing who I really was. I felt the walls of the house I lived in were suffocating me. I often snuck out to walk alone, wondering in silence where my real family was. I listened, tears rolling down my face. Every time I prayed at night, I confessed. I prayed for the child I didn't know, for the young woman whose whereabouts were unknown. Now I realize my soul must have felt those prayers like a distant whisper, accompanying you without knowing where it came from. A mother's prayers travel farther than any distance. Catherine pulled out another, photographed this one of her as an adult, standing in front of a small sewing room, her hands resting on an antique sewing machine. This room was my refuge, she explained. Working with fabrics and threads calmed me. With every stitch, I tried to sew up the emptiness I carried inside. Though I never fully succeeded, I looked at the image with understanding. I see the symbolism, I said gently. I too spent my life sewing invisible wounds. Perhaps sewing was our way of keeping the bond we were robbed of alive. Each photograph was both a blow and a balm. I cried, but not with despair. I cried with gratitude because I saw that my daughter had survived, that despite everything, she had found a way to get up and keep going, that the pain hadn't destroyed her but had turned her into a strong woman. Catherine, in a choked voice, said she always felt someone was waiting for her somewhere. I made every important decision thinking that maybe one day I could share it with that unknown mother. I replied that I had also lived with that hope. Every dawn was a chance to believe life still held a miracle for me. And now, having you in front of me, I understand that miracle has arrived. Time seemed to have stopped in that simple room. The sun's rays came through the window, illuminating the portraits, and the table became an altar of memories where two broken lives intertwined anew. I took Catherine's hands, kissed them tenderly, and thanked her for not stopping her search. Because thanks to that perseverance, I said, we can now recognize and love each other. Catherine replied, thanking me for holding on, for staying alive despite the betrayal and abandonment. That strength, she said, is what made our reunion possible. We looked into each other's eyes, and in that silent exchange, we understood that blood, love, and truth had triumphed over lies, and the bond that united our lives was intact, waiting to be recovered like a hidden treasure. In that moment, I thought that all the pain I had endured found meaning. My nights of tears, my days of loneliness, my endless prayers. It had all been a prelude to this instant when I could touch my daughter's face, see her expressions, hear her voice, and feel that the entire universe had aligned to give me back what I loved most. Catherine, in turn, understood that her search had not been in vain, that every step, every refusal, every silence in churches and offices had been part of the path that would lead her here, and together, amid tears, photographs, and hugs, we sealed a silent pact, never again to be separated, never again to let the world tear us from each other, because the bond, though broken for decades, had been restored and now burned stronger than ever. The day moved forward with a slow pace, charged with new emotions, and I felt that every minute with Catherine was a gift life offered me after so many years of darkness. We had spent hours sharing words, memories, tears, and smiles. As I watched Catherine move around the house, arranging the photographs on the table as if trying to order the fragments of her broken life, I thought this reunion was enough to make me grateful for the rest of my days. But I didn't imagine that destiny still had another twist prepared. It was Catherine who, after a long silence in which she seemed to be debating with herself, sat down across from me and took my hands gently, looking me in the eyes with a mixture of nervousness and tenderness. In a low voice, Catherine confessed that she wasn't the only person who had waited her whole life for this meeting. There is someone else who also deserved to be reunited with you, she said carefully. someone who held on to an immense love and suffered in silence because of the lies that separated you. I looked at her, confused. Who are you referring to? I asked in an almost inaudible murmur. In my mind, I couldn't imagine any more revelations after so many truths discovered in such a short time. Catherine took a deep breath, squeezed my hands a little tighter, and replied that she was talking about William, the man who had been my great love in my youth, and who, just like me, had been a victim of the intrigues and deceptions that tore us apart. I felt the name hit my chest, like an echo from the past, an echo that awakened dormant feelings and memories I had tried to bury under layers of resignation. My face trembled, and I murmured that it had been over 40 years since I heard that name in my daily life. William was the man I loved with all my soul, I whispered. But one day he disappeared, shrouded in rumors, leaving me with the feeling of betrayal. Catherine replied that the truth was much crueler than I had believed. William was also deceived, she explained. For decades he lived with the idea that you had abandoned him. My eyes widened in disbelief, as if time had rewound suddenly. I don't understand how that's possible, I said, my voice trembling. My whole life I carried the doubt and pain of being left behind without explanation. Catherine stood up with determination. It's time to close that chapter and open another, she told me firmly. You must come with me because William is still alive. His tired eyes are waiting to see the only woman he ever truly loved. William, the name I buried with my youth. I thought I was just finding my daughter, but destiny is trying to return my entire stolen life. Can my heart even handle this next reunion? My heart raced as I nodded without thinking twice, though inside a storm of emotions brewed joy, fear, hope, and the fragility of someone afraid a dream might vanish just as it was within reach. We left the house and walked together through streets that became narrower and more solitary. The outskirts of Millfield were quiet, with cornfields lying dormant under the afternoon sun. The air was filled with a solemn silence, as if nature itself were holding its breath for what was about to happen. Then I caught the distinctive scent, the rich, earthy aroma of fermenting mash and damp oak barrels that told me we were approaching a distillery. The distillery was small, built of stone and wood, with a heavy gate that Catherine pushed open with effort. I entered slowly, my eyes adjusting to the dim light, taking in the bourbon barrels stacked in rows, the bottles covered in dust, and the floor stained from years of dedicated work. It was a humble place, but filled with the dignity found only in spaces where man and earth unite in constant effort. There, in the midst of that silent space, an old man appeared with white hair and hunched shoulders, wearing a light shirt and a worn vest. His eyes, though surrounded by wrinkles, retained an intensity that was disarming, a mix of weariness and restrained fire. William looked up and froze when he saw me, as if time had stopped and the decades vanished in an instant. I too was paralyzed, unable to take a step, my hands trembling on my shawl. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other, trapped in a silence heavy with history, with questions and answers floating in the air, unspoken. It was I who first whispered his name, my voice seeming to come from the depths of my memory. William, the sound of that single word broke the stillness like shattering glass. William, with misty eyes, replied, Eleanor, at the same time, and the echo of our names mingled in the space like a shared prayer. I felt my knees buckle, my strength leaving me, and William took a step forward, though also with difficulty, as if each movement carried the weight of 4 decades of absence. Catherine watched us, tears in her eyes, knowing she was witnessing not just the reunion of two souls who never stopped loving each other, but also the repair of an injustice that had marked our lives. William spoke first, his voice deep and worn by the years. I never stopped loving you, he said, despite what they made me believe. Not a single day passed without me thinking of you. He explained that they had tricked him, told him I had abandoned him, that I had chosen another and never wanted to hear from him again. Those words shattered me so completely, he confessed, that I left without looking back, unable to bear the shame. I felt tears blur my vision as I replied. I too was a victim of lies, I said, my voice trembling. They assured me you had betrayed me, that you had fled because you didn't want the responsibility of a family, and that you had never truly loved me. Some loves are not lost to time, only waiting to be rediscovered. Those phrases stuck in my heart like knives, I continued. I spent my entire life wondering what I did wrong, why I wasn't enough to keep you. My loneliness was the cruel price of that lie. As we spoke, piecing together the fragments of our shared past, the shadow of the true culprit emerged. It was my father, William said, his voice thick with an old, cold anger. He never approved of you. He said your family wasn't good enough for ours. He must have intercepted my letters, and when he found out you were pregnant, he trailed off, unable to say the words. In turn, I remembered the whispers from my own parents, their sudden insistence that I go away to Millfield to handle the situation, their relief when I returned broken and empty-handed, telling me it was God's will. We had all been manipulated. They stole our daughter, I whispered, the full weight of the betrayal settling upon us. And they stole our life. It wasn't just strangers or fate. It was our own families who tore us apart. You can't get back those 40 years. But as we stood there, facing each other across the chasm of lost time, we knew we could choose what to do with the time that remained. William pressed his lips together and with a gesture of impotence, raised his hands as if trying to snatch the shadows of the past from the air. They took away the one thing that gave my life meaning, he said. The rumors and false news turned me into a ghost. The weight of that absence was too much for a man who only wanted to be loved. We both remained silent for a moment, tears streaming down our cheeks, until our gazes met with an intensity that pierced through time and wounds. It was then that William took a step forward, extended his hands, and intertwined them with mine. The contact was electric, an invisible bridge collapsing 4 decades of distance in a single instant. It doesn't matter what was taken from us, I whispered. In this moment, the only real things are our joined hands and the certainty that we never stopped belonging to each other. William replied that this gesture was more powerful than any words. Feeling your skin against mine again, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I understand all the pain has been worth it if in the end life gives us this chance. The atmosphere filled with a restrained emotion, and memories of the past began to resurface like sparks. I spoke in a trembling voice of the afternoons we dreamed of a future together, of the walks through the fields where he promised he would love me forever. I confess, I said, that every one of those promises lived hidden in the deepest part of my heart, resisting the passage of time. William replied that he too had kept those memories like treasures every time. I felt life slipping through my fingers, he said. I closed my eyes and saw your smile. It was that image that kept me going. We looked at each other like two young people meeting again after a long journey, our tenderness intact, with the maturity that only pain can grant. It was then that William gathered his courage and said he didn't want to waste any more time. Although our bodies are marked by wrinkles and scars, he told me, our souls are still the same. I want to walk beside you for the last stretch of life. Tears fell uncontrollably down my face as I replied. There's no greater gift than hearing those words, I said. I also want to share whatever is left, whether it's years or just a few days, because the important thing is that we're finally together, free from deceit. In that instant, the distillery became a sanctuary, where two old but living hearts recognized each other and promised love once again. I looked up and said that time had taken too much from us, the children we could have raised together, the youthful nights that vanished. But I won't stay trapped in nostalgia, I affirmed. I prefer to look forward, to live what's left with joy and gratitude, because destiny, despite its cruelty, has given us the chance to find each other again. William, moved, replied that this was the strength of true love, the kind that withstands lies, abandonment, and even the relentless passage of time. He leaned toward me, rested his forehead on mine, and murmured that he would never leave me alone again, that he would walk beside me until his last breath. We remained united, feeling the energy of the past transform into a luminous present. In that instant, we understood there is no age for love, that the years are not a sentence but a test overcome, and that our hearts still had the capacity to beat as one. But even as we embraced this new beginning, I couldn't help but wonder about the son I had left behind in Lexington, the son who had thrown me out, but who was still my child. What would become of him now that my life had taken this unexpected turn? In Lexington, the dusty streets still held the shadow of the last cruel goodbye between a mother and son. David walked through the hallways of his house with a strange discomfort, as if the walls surrounding him were beginning to accuse him in silence. The neighbors, who once looked at him with forced respect, now whispered behind his back, and those low, sharp voices reached his ears like echoes he couldn't ignore. One morning, while stopping at the local market, he heard two women talking, not knowing he was close enough to hear. One of them said with an incredulous tone, "Poor Eleanor was found in Millfield by a daughter they thought was dead, and she's reunited with an old love named William." The other woman replied, "It seems like a miracle that the old woman was never alone in the world as everyone thought. The truth always comes to light." David felt a shiver down his spine as if every word were a slap forcing him to face the reality he had so long avoided. He walked back to his house, his face hardened, his heart at war with itself. He shut the door abruptly and slumped into a chair, pressing his sweaty forehead with his hands. He thought of the last image of his mother, her back hunched, carrying a small bag, while he told her in an icy voice to leave, that she was no longer his problem. Those words returned with cruel clarity, repeated like hammer blows in his memory. He remembered how he closed the door behind her and heard the dry sound of loneliness, a sound that now tormented him more than any noise in the world. For years he had lived believing a son's duty was to be firm, that his mother's fragility was a burden, and that getting rid of her was a practical decision. But now, facing the truth coming from the mouths of neighbors, he understood that what he had done wasn't firmness or practicality. It was cowardice disguised as toughness. The rumors kept coming like unstoppable rivers. Another neighbor mentioned that Catherine was his sister, the daughter stolen from Eleanor when she was young, and that mother and daughter had cried together upon recognizing each other. David clenched his fists, feeling the blood boil in his face with shame. He thought of his childhood, of the moments his mother held him when he was afraid of the dark, of the days she went without food so he could eat, and guilt cut through him like a knife. The weight of regret is heavier than any burden we try to escape. He wondered how he could have kicked out the woman who had always supported him, how he had spoken those hurtful phrases that now haunted him like ghosts. The truth was finally reaching David, and that guilt was a heavy price to pay. He thought he was throwing away a burden, but he threw away his entire family. Now the only question was what he was going to do about it. He shot up, pacing like a caged animal, and muttered that he had to see her, that he had to ask for forgiveness, even if it meant kneeling before her, because otherwise the guilt would consume him. That same afternoon, he decided to pack a small bag. He put in only what was necessary, because the only thing he was really carrying was the weight of his regret. He looked at his reflection in the mirror, and for the first time, he didn't see the tough man he had wanted to show the world, but a son defeated by his own decisions. He remembered his mother's look the day he threw her out, a mixture of pain and resignation that he refused to see then, but which suffocated him now. "I've been a monster," he said in a low voice. "I behaved like someone heartless. If she receives me, even with a look of contempt, it will be more than I deserve." He understood that Catherine, his sister, was living proof that Eleanor was never alone, that the blood connecting them couldn't be erased, and that he had been blind to reject the only person who gave him everything. With his decision made, he left for the bus station with a quick step, not looking back. The cold Lexington air seemed to punish him, but at the same time, it pushed him forward. He bought a ticket to Millfield and sat in the seat, his head in his hands as the engine began to roar. The trip felt long, not because of the distance, but because of the whirlwind of thoughts devouring him. Every mile was a painful memory: his mother's tired face as she served him food, the sound of her cough in the night, her wrinkled hands folding laundry, her soft voice advising him when he was a child. Now all of that weighed like stones on his chest, and tears began to slide uncontrollably, wetting the sleeves of his shirt. In the dim light of the bus, surrounded by strangers, David thought about what he would say. He imagined kneeling in front of Eleanor and begging her to forgive him, telling her he had been ungrateful, a son who let greed and hardness control him, but that he now understood nothing in the world was worth more than a mother. He also imagined the face of Catherine, the sister he never knew he had, and wondered if she would look at him with contempt or compassion. He knew he couldn't demand anything, that he had lost the right to be forgiven, but he still wanted to face the truth, because only then could he redeem, even slightly, the unbearable weight of his guilt. As the bus moved through mountains and fields, David gripped the seat tightly, feeling every turn bring him closer to an inevitable judgment. The sky began to darken, and in the distance the lights of Millfield shined like stars within reach. He thought that maybe Eleanor wouldn't want to see him anymore, that perhaps she would reject him with the same harshness he had used on her, and he accepted that this might be his fate. However, a spark of hope remained alive in his chest, the hope that a mother, even when wounded, always keeps the capacity to forgive somewhere in her soul. He arrived in the city, his body exhausted but his decision firm. He got off the bus and took a deep breath like someone preparing to face the most difficult chapter of his life. With heavy steps, he entered the streets of Millfield, searching for the address he had heard from the neighbors, and as he walked, he muttered over and over that he had to ask for forgiveness, that he had to repair the damage. Even knowing that no words would be enough, David understood now that the abandonment he forced on his mother wasn't just a mistake, it was a wound that would mark him forever, and only by facing it head-on could he regain a piece of his dignity. And so under the night sky covering the city, he advanced, his heart on fire, determined to kneel before Eleanor and admit he had failed, that he had been cruel, but that he still wanted to be her son, if she would allow him one last chance. Meanwhile, back at Catherine's humble house, the dim light from a lamp illuminated the simple walls and the human warmth that filled every corner. After days of revelations and reunions, I was sitting in a wooden chair, my hands clasped in my lap, my eyes still damp from all I had experienced, while Catherine prepared hot tea in the small kitchen. It was then that hurried footsteps were heard on the street, an irregular sound revealing both exhaustion and anxiety. The knock on the door echoed insistently, and I felt my heart jump without knowing why. Catherine went to open it and found herself facing a man with a haggard face, red eyes, and ragged breathing. It was David, her brother, the son who had thrown me out of the house, the son who had spoken words so cruel they still stung like knife wounds in everyone's memory. David entered with unsteady steps, like a lost child seeking refuge after being punished. His gaze landed on me, and in that instant everything he had held back collapsed. David moved slowly until he was in front of me, and suddenly, unable to hold himself up, he fell to his knees on the floor. His voice emerged broken, trembling with desperation. "Mother," he choked out, "I threw you onto the street, and destiny has punished me. Forgive me." Tears began to roll violently down his cheeks, wetting his face long hardened by life. Every word he spoke was soaked in a regret he couldn't hide. "I've been blind," he confessed, his shoulders shaking. "I let selfishness and greed control me. I treated the only person who loved me unconditionally as if she were a burden. From the moment I watched you leave, I haven't had a single day of peace." I watched him with a mixture of pain and tenderness, my mind flashing back to that afternoon in Lexington when he had coldly pointed to the door. Now I saw him humiliated, vulnerable, kneeling before me as if recognizing the magnitude of his sin. I closed my eyes for a moment and took a deep breath, because two opposing forces warred within me: the still open wound of the contempt I suffered, and the indestructible love of a mother that never disappears. I slowly raised a hand and rested it on David's head. In a calm voice, heavy with emotion, I told him, "The pain you caused will never be erased." My voice was clear, no longer trembling. "What you did, David, broke the last piece of me that was left." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. "But in breaking me," I continued, "you set me free. If you had not cast me out, I would never have found the letter. I would never have found my daughter. I would never have found William." I looked at him, not with the eyes of a victim, but with the wisdom of a survivor. "I have found my life. My pain has been turned into joy. And because of that, because I am no longer that broken woman you threw away, I can forgive you." David trembled, unable to meet my gaze, but I leaned toward him, took his shoulders, and forced him to stand. "Not because you have earned it," I said firmly, "but because I am finally whole, and I will not let bitterness have the final word." Forgiveness isn't about forgetting the wound, but about choosing to heal. That right there, that is true strength. Not revenge, but compassion. I wasn't just healing my past, I was healing my future. And in that gesture, the invisible chains of guilt that oppressed him melted away. Catherine, watching from the kitchen, couldn't hold back her tears. She leaned her hand on the door frame, thinking she was witnessing a different kind of miracle. She had found a mother after decades of absence, but now she was watching a repentant son regain the same mother after having despised her. She understood in the depths of her being that forgiveness wasn't just a word spoken between sobs. It was a force capable of healing the seemingly impossible. She watched as I, frail but immensely strong, transformed pain into compassion, and understood that a family's true healing couldn't be complete without that capacity to forgive. Silence took over the room for a long moment, broken only by David's muffled sobs. I caressed his face with trembling hands and told him I had never stopped loving him. Even on the night I mentally cursed you for throwing me out, I whispered, "I still asked God to watch over you." David cried like a child. "I don't deserve such love," he wept. "I've been ungrateful. I don't know how to fix everything I've broken." I replied that mending things didn't always come with grand gestures, but with sincerity of the heart. "The important thing," I said, "is to recognize the mistake and not repeat it." Catherine approached then, placing a hand on her brother's shoulder. "We've both suffered the same wound," she told him gently, "because we both lost our mother to lies. But now we can start over together if we're able to stay united." David looked up at Catherine and felt a pang of shame. "I don't know how to look you in the eyes," he admitted. "While you searched desperately for our mother for years, I had her by my side and threw her out without compassion." Catherine replied calmly that he shouldn't compare because everyone's pain was different. "The important thing," she said, "is that you now recognize your mistakes and are willing to make amends." David nodded slowly, tears still streaming down his cheeks, and murmured that he would dedicate himself to caring for me and protecting me, that he would never leave me alone again. The reconciliation was sealed, with a hug between the three of us, an embrace, mixing my fragility, Catherine's renewed strength, and David's repentance. Outside, the night wind blew softly, as if nature itself wanted to witness the redemption of a family that had been broken for too long. I closed my eyes and thought that life, despite everything, had given me back more than I ever dared to dream. A lost daughter, a rediscovered love, and a repentant son returning to my fold. In that instant, in that small house in Millfield, I understood that the true victory wasn't escaping pain, but transforming it into a love capable of forgiveness. Later that evening, as we sat together sharing a simple meal, David listened with wonder as Catherine and I shared stories of our separate lives. He watched how William, who had joined us, looked at me with the same devotion he must have shown 40 years ago. "I want to make things right," David said quietly when there was a lull in the conversation. "Not just with words, but with actions." William studied him for a long moment before speaking. "The measure of a man isn't in his mistakes," he said, his voice rough with age and emotion, "but in what he does to fix them." David met his gaze and nodded. I understand that now. As night deepened, we sat in the warm glow of the lamplight, a family torn apart by lies and reunited by truth, bound not just by blood, but by the conscious choice to love and forgive. And in that moment, I knew that every painful step of my journey had been worth it. The betrayal, the lonely road, the years of wondering, all of it had led to this beautiful, imperfect, but whole family circle. The healing wouldn't happen overnight, and the scars would remain. But as I looked at my children, both the one I just found and the one who had returned to me and the man I had never stopped loving, I knew we had everything we needed to face whatever time we had left together. For the first time in 40 years, I went to sleep with a heart that was not just full, but finally at peace. 5 years. It feels both like a lifetime and the blink of an eye. The morning sun is warm on my face, and from this porch swing, I can see the entire story of my new life unfolding in this quiet garden. David comes every Sunday without fail, no longer the hardened man who shut a door in my face, but a son softened by regret and redeemed by action. He fixed the loose step on this very porch last week, his hands so like his father's, working with a care I never saw in him before. We don't speak often of that dark day in Lexington. The memory is a faded scar now, acknowledged but no longer painful. And Catherine, my Catherine, she calls me Mom with a certainty that fills a hollow space in my soul I thought would be empty forever. We have spent these years stitching our lives together, thread by careful thread, creating a tapestry far more beautiful than the one that was torn apart. She has her own life, her own quiet strength, but she always makes time for tea in the afternoons, for sharing stories we were robbed of for 40 years. William brings me a cup of tea now, the steam curling in the cool morning air. He sits beside me, his presence a steady, comforting weight that anchors me to this good and simple life we've built. We were married in this very garden 2 years ago, surrounded by the family we thought we'd lost. It wasn't a grand affair, but it was everything. Happy anniversary, my love, he says, his voice still capable of making my heart flutter. It's not our wedding anniversary he speaks of, but the day I first knocked on Catherine's door, the day our family was reborn. The greatest legacy is not what we leave behind, but the love we rebuild. He takes my hand, his grip still firm. We don't need many words anymore. The silence between us is filled with a lifetime of understanding, a shared history of loss and a profound gratitude for this second chance. I think of the letter, that fragile piece of paper that changed everything. I keep it still, tucked away in a small wooden box. It is not a reminder of the pain, but a testament to the fact that even when all seems lost, hope can find you on a dusty road. My body is older now, a little more frail. The winters are harder on my bones, but my heart is younger than it has been in decades. It is light, unburdened by the weight of betrayal and grief. David is helping William in the shed, their voices a low, companionable murmur. I watch them, my son and the love of my life, finding a common ground in the simple act of fixing a broken chair. This is the healing I never dared to dream of. Catherine joins us on the porch, smelling of earth and sunshine. She smiles at me, and in her face, I see the young woman I was, the child she was, and the strong, resilient woman she became. The circle feels complete. The story that began with a slammed door ends here, on this sun-drenched porch, with the soft creak of a swing and the sound of my family around me. They say time heals all wounds. I don't think that's quite right. Time doesn't erase the scars. It just teaches you how to live with them. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it shows you how those very scars can become the map that leads you home. The seasons have turned 5 times since my world was remade, and with each passing year, the sharp edges of the past have softened into something resembling grace. This garden has become the living scrapbook of our restored family, bearing witness to quiet birthdays, laughter-filled gatherings, and the simple, profound peace of togetherness. Catherine turns a page in the album, her finger resting on a photograph from our small wedding. You look so happy here, Mom, she says, her voice warm with affection. I look at the picture at William's arm linked with mine, at David standing proudly as his best man, at Catherine beaming as my maid of honor. I tell her, and the truth of it still feels like a miracle. I am. The pain of my old life is no longer a sharp sting, but a distant echo. It doesn't define me anymore. Instead, it has become the foundation upon which I've built this new, unexpected happiness. William and I spend our days in quiet contentment. Our love, rediscovered after 40 years of separation, has a depth and sweetness I could never have imagined in my youth. David has kept his promise, becoming the son I always knew he could be. His transformation wasn't overnight, but a gradual, steady turning. He visits often, sometimes with groceries, sometimes just to sit and talk. The hardness in his eyes has been replaced by a gentle humility. We've spoken of forgiveness of the past, but mostly we simply enjoy the present. One afternoon, as Catherine and I are pruning her rose bushes, she turns to me with a thoughtful expression. "Mom," she begins, "all those years you spent alone, all the years I spent searching, there must be others like us." Her words settle in the space between us. She's right. Our story, while unique in its details, is not unique in its essence. There are other families fractured by lies, other elderly parents cast aside, other children searching for their roots. Our deepest wounds can become a wellspring of strength for others. A new purpose begins to stir within me, faint at first, then growing stronger. The letter that guided me here wasn't just for my benefit. Perhaps my journey was meant to become a map for others who are lost. That evening, I share the idea with William as we watch the sunset from our porch. What if we could help? I ask him. What if our story could give others hope? He takes my hand, his grip steady and sure. "Eleanor," he says, his voice filled with pride. I think that's a beautiful way to honor everything we've been through. We gather as a family, David, Catherine, William, and I, and we talk late into the night. We speak of creating something, a small sanctuary of support for others navigating similar heartbreak. David, using skills I never knew he had, offers to help with practical matters. Catherine, with her compassionate heart, wants to provide emotional support. William, my rock, promises his steadfast presence. It starts modestly. We open Catherine's home one afternoon a week for tea and conversation. Word spreads slowly through Millfield. First comes Mrs. Gable, whose daughter hasn't spoken to her in 3 years. Then Mr. Henderson, who was cheated out of his home by a nephew he trusted. We don't have all the answers. We simply offer what we ourselves needed most. A listening ear, a shared story, the simple message that they are not alone. We call it the healing circle, and as the weeks pass, our small gathering grows. One Thursday, an elderly man named Arthur arrives, clutching a photograph of a son he hasn't seen in a decade. As he shares his story, his voice trembling with decades of regret, I see David listening intently. Later, I find my son talking quietly with Arthur on the porch, offering words of hard-won wisdom about reconciliation. Watching them, I feel a profound sense of peace. My son, who once caused such deep hurt, is now using his experience to heal the wounds of others. The circle of healing continues to widen, touching lives in ways I never anticipated. As I look around the room at these brave souls sharing their stories, I understand that my life's greatest purpose wasn't just to find my own family, but to help others find their way back to theirs. The little girl who was stolen, the love that was lost, the son who strayed, every painful chapter has given me the wisdom to offer comfort to those now walking similar paths. The journey that began with a slammed door and a dusty road has led me here, to this moment, surrounded by my beautiful, imperfect family and extended to a community of healing hearts. My story is no longer just mine. It has become part of a larger tapestry of redemption and hope. The healing circle has become the heartbeat of my weeks. Today, a new face appears at Catherine's door, a woman named Clara. Perhaps my age, her eyes holding that familiar, haunting blend of hope and fear. She sits beside me, her hands trembling slightly as she speaks of a grandson she hasn't seen in years, her voice a fragile thread of sound. "I don't know where I went wrong," she whispers, her gaze fixed on the floor. I place my hand over hers. We often blame ourselves for paths chosen by others. I tell her softly, the fault is not always ours to carry. I share a piece of my own story, not the whole of it, but the part about David, about the long road back to each other. I see a flicker of recognition in her eyes, a tiny spark of hope igniting. This is what the healing circle does. It doesn't offer solutions on a platter. It offers companionship in the dark, a hand to hold until one finds their own light. Later, William finds me in the garden, quiet and thoughtful. "You gave her something precious today, Eleanor," he says, his voice full of quiet pride. He doesn't mean the tea or the comfortable chair. He means the validation that her pain is seen and that her story matters. David has taken on a role I never could have imagined for him. 5 years ago, he helps the members of our circle with practical matters, reading fine print on legal documents, fixing a leaky faucet, moving a heavy piece of furniture. It is his language of love and atonement. I watch him patiently explaining something to Mr. Henderson, and my heart swells with a quiet, profound joy. The man who once saw care as a burden now gives it freely. Catherine is the soul of our little group. She has a gift for listening, for making each person feel they are the only one in the room. She has started a small journal with permission, recording the common threads in our stories. "It's not just about loneliness, Mom," she tells me one evening. "It's about a loss of purpose, being made to feel you no longer have value." Her words strike a deep chord. I remember that feeling vividly, the crushing weight of thinking my life was over, that I was nothing but a burden. Finding that letter, as terrifying as it was, gave me a purpose. It gave me a quest. Our value isn't diminished by age. It is refined by experience. Now, I see the healing circle doing the same for others. It gives people a reason to get dressed on a Thursday, a place to be, a community where they are not defined by their losses but by their resilience. One Thursday, Clara returns. This time, she stands a little taller. She announces to the group that she wrote a letter to her grandson. She doesn't know if he will reply, but she found the courage to reach out. The room fills with soft applause and words of encouragement. This is a victory, not an ending, but a brave new beginning. After everyone has left, Catherine and I clean up in comfortable silence. She looks at me, her eyes shining. "This is because of you, Mom," she says. "This whole thing, you started this." I shake my head, placing a cup back on its shelf. "No, my dear," I correct her gently. "I simply passed on the hope that was given to me." That letter on the road, it was a thread. I just picked it up. We are all weaving this tapestry together. That night, as I prepare for bed, I look at my reflection in the mirror. The wrinkles are deeper, the silver in my hair more pronounced. But the woman looking back at me is not the broken soul David cast out. She is not the grieving young mother, nor the woman betrayed by her first love. She is Eleanor, a wife, a mother, a grandmother in spirit if not by blood to the members of our circle. She is whole. William is already in bed, reading. I slip in beside him, and he puts his book down, opening his arm for me to settle against his side. This simple, nightly ritual is a blessing I will never take for granted. Our story didn't end with our reunion. "William," I muse aloud, my head on his shoulder. "It was just the beginning of a new chapter." He kisses my forehead. "A very good chapter," he murmurs. And as I drift off to sleep, I think of Clara's courageous letter, of David's transformed heart, of Catherine's compassionate work. Our small circle is proof that it is never too late to forgive, to be forgiven, to find a new purpose, to build a new family from the broken pieces of the old. The legacy of that dusty road and the tattered letter is not just the family I found, but the family we are now building for others, one Thursday at a time. The changes in David have been the quietest, and perhaps the most profound. He has always been a man of action, not words. His apology was a seismic event, but his atonement has been a silent, steady river. carving a new path through the landscape of our lives. I find him in the small shed behind Catherine's house, a place that has become his sanctuary. He's focused on a delicate task, his large, capable hands. I once saw point a dismissive finger toward the door, now handling a tiny, rusted gear with infinite patience. "It's for Mrs. Gable," he says without looking up, sensing my presence. Her husband gave it to her on their wedding day. Hasn't worked in years. He doesn't say more, but I understand. This isn't just about fixing a mechanism. It's about mending a memory, honoring a love story that lasted, unlike the one that was stolen from William and me. This is his language, where I offer words and Catherine offers a listening ear. David offers the tangible proof of care, a repaired step, a stocked pantry, a restored melody. Later that week, at the Healing Circle, David presents the music box to Mrs. Gable. When he turns the key and a faint, tinkling melody begins to play, her face transforms. Tears well in her eyes, but they are tears of joy, of a precious memory brought back to life. "Oh, David," she whispers, her voice thick with emotion. "How can I ever thank you?" He simply shakes his head, a faint, unaccustomed smile touching his lips. "No thanks needed, ma'am." In that moment, I see the final piece of his healing click into place. He is no longer just the man seeking forgiveness. He is the man capable of giving profound, quiet grace. He has discovered that his strength, once used to build walls, can now be used to build bridges. On our weekly walk to the farmer's market, William and I talk about David's transformation. "He's found his place," William observes, his hand firmly holding mine. "It took him a long time, but he found it." I nod, squeezing his hand. The market is bustling with life, a vibrant tapestry of our community. We are no longer just Eleanor and William, the couple with a tragic past. We are part of the fabric of Millfield. We are the people who run the Healing Circle. We are David's parents, Catherine's family. Redemption is not a single moment, but a lifetime of choosing kindness. We stop at a stall selling honey, and the young woman behind the counter smiles warmly at us. "For the Healing Circle?" she asks, already knowing the answer. We often bring back treats for our Thursday gatherings. Our small mission has quietly woven itself into the town's identity. Catherine meets us at home, her face alight with a new idea. With David's practical help and William's steadfast support, she wants to create a small resource guide, a list of local services, legal aid contacts, and friendly tradespeople who can help others in situations like the one I was in. It's a way to turn our shared stories into practical support, to ensure no one has to face their darkest hours without a lifeline. As we sit around the kitchen table, the four of us planning this new project, I am overwhelmed by a sense of wholeness. This is my family, not a perfect family, but a real one, forged in forgiveness, strengthened by shared purpose, and bound by a love that was tested by fire and emerged stronger. David looks across the table at me, and in his eyes, I see no trace of the coldness that once lived there. I see respect. I see love. I see my son. The journey that began with a bag of rags and a desperate heart has led here, to this table, to this simple, profound moment of unity. The past is not forgotten, but it no longer holds us captive. We have taken its broken pieces and are building something beautiful, not just for ourselves, but for anyone in our community who needs a reminder that even after the longest winter, spring always comes. Today, our home is filled with more than just our usual circle. What began as a small weekly meeting has blossomed into something we never anticipated. Word of our little group has spread, not as a place of sorrow, but as a place of second chances. Today, we're celebrating a year of the Healing Circle, and the garden is full of faces old and new, each with their own story of fracture and hope. I see Clara, who now volunteers at the local library, reading to children. She catches my eye and gives me a wave, her face no longer shadowed by fear. I see Mr. Henderson, who, with David's help, successfully contested his nephew's claims and now lives peacefully. in his own small apartment. He is talking animatedly with William about bourbon recipes. The air is thick with the scent of good food and the sound of shared laughter. It is a symphony of resilience. David stands near the porch, looking out over the gathering. I can see the awe on his face. He is not the center of attention, but he is a vital part of the foundation. He has built most of the benches people are sitting on, fixed the leaking roof over the patio, and ensured every elder here has a safe, working smoke detector in their home. His redemption is written not in words, but in the solid, reliable world around us. As the afternoon sun casts long, golden shadows, Catherine gently rings a small bell, calling for everyone's attention. The murmuring crowd settles into a comfortable silence. We're here today not to dwell on what was broken, she begins, her voice clear and strong, but to celebrate what we have built. Together, she speaks of the power of shared stories, of the courage it takes to reach out, and of the simple, profound act of listening. Then, she does something that surprises me. She turns to David. My brother has something he'd like to share. A hush falls over the garden. David is a man of action, not speeches. He looks at me, and I give him a small, encouraging nod. He clears his throat, stepping forward. I'm not good with words, he starts, his voice rough with emotion. Most of you know me as the one who fixes things. He pauses, gathering his thoughts. But 5 years ago, I was the one who broke the most important thing in my life. I threw my mother out of her home. The confession hangs in the air, raw and honest. No one gasps. This is a safe space. They simply listen. I was selfish. I was blind. I thought I was getting rid of a burden. His gaze finds mine again, and I see the love and remorse shining in his eyes. I was wrong. I wasn't throwing away a burden. I was throwing away a treasure, and it took me losing everything to realize it. A family restored is a light that can illuminate an entire community. He doesn't ask for sympathy. He simply states his truth. This circle, my mother's forgiveness, it gave me a chance to rebuild, not just my relationship with her, but my own soul. If my story, my mistake, can help even one person here see the value in the family they have, before it's too late, then some of that pain will have been worth it. He sits down to a wave of not applause, but a deep, respectful silence, followed by understanding nods. His vulnerability has done more than any polished speech could have. It has cemented the very purpose of our gathering. We are all imperfect. We have all made mistakes, and we all deserve a path back to love. As the celebration continues, William slips his arm around my waist. Look what you started, Eleanor, he whispers into my hair. But I shake my head, leaning into his embrace. No, my love, I correct him softly, looking out at the thriving community in our garden. I just planted a single seed. It was all of you, Catherine, David, every person here who chose to water it with their courage and their kindness. That made it grow into this. The legacy of my pain is not a scar. It is this garden, these people, this profound understanding that no one is ever truly beyond redemption. Our story, which began with a single, desperate woman on a dusty road, has become a tapestry of many stories, all woven together with threads of hope, forgiveness, and the unshakable belief that it is never, ever too late to come home. Seasons have a way of folding into one another, each leaving its subtle mark on the land and on the soul. 7 years now since my life was reborn on that dusty road. The frantic energy of new beginnings has settled into a deep, abiding rhythm. A rhythm of contentment. This quilt on my lap is a map of my life. Some patches are from a dress I wore as a young woman, full of dreams for a future I thought I would have with William. A darker, rougher patches from the bag I carried the day David cast me out. And here, these bright, beautiful pieces are from the dress I wore when Catherine and I were reunited, and from the shawl I had at my wedding to William. Each stitch tells a story, not just of pain, but of survival, not just of loss, but of reclamation. This quilt is my legacy, stitched not for warmth, but for memory. a tangible record of a journey from darkness into light. My body tells me it is slowing down. The steps to the garden seem a little steeper. The winter chill settles deeper in my bones, but my spirit has never felt lighter. There is a profound peace in knowing your work on this earth is complete. Not finished, but complete. The seeds have been planted. They are now growing on their own. I watch Catherine now, the undeniable leader of the healing circle. She no longer needs my guidance. She has made it her own, expanding it, bringing in younger volunteers to help with technology and transportation. She is the future of this work. She is the daughter I lost, now a pillar of the community, ensuring no one else has to feel as alone as we once did. And David, my son, he stopped by this morning to check the latch on my window. A simple, unnecessary task, but I understood it was his way of saying, I'm here. I'm watching over you. The gruff man is gone, replaced by a gentle, dependable soul. His redemption is the quietest, most personal victory of my life. William enters, bringing me a cup of tea, his movements slower now, but his care for me as diligent as ever. He sits beside me, his presence a familiar comfort. We don't need to fill the silence. We have earned this quiet understanding. A life well lived is measured not in years, but in the love that remains when you are gone. The circle was full again last Thursday, he says. A statement of fact, not of surprise. It is a permanent fixture now, a part of Millfield's heartbeat. Long after the need for my physical presence there has passed. I nod, looking out the window at the garden, now dormant for the winter. It's in good hands, I reply, and I mean it. The work will continue. The stories will be shared. The healing will ripple outward, long after my name is forgotten. This is the true meaning of a legacy. It isn't a grand monument or a vast fortune. It is the love you planted in the hearts of others. Love that they, in turn, now share with the world. It is David's repaired music boxes, Catherine's compassionate listening, William's steady hand on my shoulder. I feel no fear for what comes next. How could I? I have been given the rarest of gifts, a second chance to live, to love, and to leave this world knowing I made a difference. My story, which began with an ending, is now closing on a note of perfect, peaceful grace. The final stitch in the quilt has been placed. The pattern is whole. The house feels different now, quieter. It's been 3 months since Mom left us. The silence she left behind isn't empty though. It's filled with a profound, echoing love. William has moved in with his sister in the next town over. This house, with all its memories, was too much for him to bear alone. David and I see him every week. He's quiet, but at peace. He had his second chance with her, and he cherishes every day they were given. I sit here on the porch swing, her quilt wrapped around my shoulders. It still carries the faint scent of her lavender and tea. I can almost feel the impression of her hands on the fabric. She was ready. She had said her work was complete, but ours continues. The healing circle met last Thursday. It was the first one without her physical presence. We left her favorite chair empty. For a moment, the silence felt heavy, uncertain. Then Clara spoke. She didn't talk about her own troubles. She told a story about Mom, about the first day she came here, a broken woman clutching a letter, and how that woman's courage gave her the strength to write to her own grandson. One by one, others joined in, Mr. Henderson, others. They didn't speak of loss. They spoke of her legacy. They shared small moments, a piece of advice she gave, a quiet smile, the way she made everyone feel seen. The empty chair wasn't a void. It became a symbol. It was filled with her spirit, with the countless lives she had gently, quietly changed. David has taken over the practical coordination of the circle. He's the one who now checks in on everyone, who organizes the volunteers, who fixes what is broken. He does it with a quiet dedication that is his final, lasting gift to her. He is living his amends every single day. I have her journal, the one she started when we first began this work. The pages are filled with her elegant, looping script, not just stories of pain, but observations of strength, notes on what seemed to help, ideas for the future. It's a roadmap, My new purpose is clear: to ensure her wisdom is not lost, that it continues to guide this community for generations. The end of a life is not the end of its influence. Love is a ripple that never truly fades. Today, a new woman came to the circle. She was hesitant, standing at the edge of the garden just like Mom once did. Her son had taken her car, her independence. She felt useless, cast aside. I went to her, and I didn't offer solutions. I simply took her hand and said, "Let me tell you about a woman named Eleanor." As I spoke, I saw the same flicker of hope in her eyes that Mom must have seen in mine all those years ago. The circle continues. The work goes on. Mom's story is no longer just hers. It's become a foundational stone for this community, a story we tell to light the way for others. I miss her. The ache is a constant, gentle companion, but it's an ache layered with immense gratitude. She didn't just give me back a mother. She gave me a purpose. She showed me that from the deepest betrayal, the most beautiful redemption can grow. The garden is waking up for spring. The first green shoots are pushing through the dark earth. It's a cycle she loved. Life, dormant for a season, always returns. Her love, her work, her legacy, it hasn't died. It has simply taken a new form. It lives in David's steadfastness, in William's peaceful heart, in the courage of every person who finds their way to our circle, and in me. I am my mother's daughter, and I will tend this garden she planted for the rest of my days. The legacy of a single life, when rooted in love, can branch out in ways never imagined. The work of the healing circle has not just continued, it has evolved, finding new forms and touching new generations. David, who once saw his hands only as tools for his own survival, now uses them to build up others. He volunteers here at the Millfield Community Center every Tuesday. His students are teenagers, some from difficult homes, some just looking for direction. He doesn't lecture them. He shows them how to hold a chisel, how to sand a rough edge smooth, how to see a project through to its end. Patience, David says, his voice calm and steady. The wood will tell you what it needs. You just have to listen. I watch from the doorway, my heart so full it feels it might burst. This is the man who slammed a door. This is his redemption, alive and breathing in this room, passed on to a boy who might have otherwise fallen through the cracks. He is not just fixing objects anymore. He is helping to build character, to shape futures. Later, at our now weekly family dinner at my house, David seems lighter. William is here too, his smile a little less shadowed by grief each week. We are a different family than the one that sat at this table a year ago, but we are no less a family. Young Marcus finished his birdhouse today, David tells us over stew, perfectly level. He was so proud. There's a quiet pride in his own voice, a satisfaction that comes not from receiving, but from giving. William nods, a knowing look in his eyes. You're a good teacher, son. The word son hangs in the air for a moment. It's not a title of blood, but of choice, of earned respect. David meets his gaze and gives a single, grateful nod. The circle of our family has widened, its bonds forged in forgiveness and mutual care. The seeds of our past, however painful, can grow into a forest of shelter for others. I share the news from the healing circle. We've partnered with the local school. Next month, the children will come to plant a garden of second chances in the plot behind the community center. It was Clara's idea. Our elders will share stories of resilience, and the children will learn that people, like plants, can weather terrible storms and still bloom. It's a perfect merging of our mission, honoring the past while investing in the future. Mom's story will be one of those shared, not as a tragedy, but as a testament to hope. After dinner, David and I look over the plans for the garden. He points out where he'll build the raised beds to make them accessible for everyone. His practical mind, once used only for himself, is now a tool for community building. She'd love this, you know, I say softly, my finger tracing the drawing of a winding path. David doesn't need to ask who I mean. He looks around my home, at William sipping his tea, at the blueprint between us. She'd love that we're still doing it together, he replies. And he's right. The greatest part of Mom's legacy isn't the circle itself, or the garden, or even the countless lives touched. It's this: the family she brought back together, now united in a common purpose. Our love for her reflected in our love for each other and for our community. The story that began with Anne ending has become a story that has no end. It lives and breathes in every act of kindness it inspired, in every heart it mended, in every new beginning it made possible. Our mother's last letter wasn't found in a bag of rags. It is written in the lives we lead now. And as we sit together, planning for a future she helped ensure was possible, I know with absolute certainty that her work and her love are truly eternal. Time moves in spirals, not lines. The stories we think are over simply find new characters to live through. I see it now, watching this young woman approach our community center. Her name is Sarah, and she carries that same lost look I remember seeing in my mother's eyes years ago. The look of someone whose world has recently shattered. She holds a flyer for the healing circle, her knuckles white. She's too young for this, I think, but pain doesn't check identification. I approach her, and she looks up with startled, tear-bright eyes. My husband, she begins, then falters. He left with our savings. I have a 2-year-old. I don't know what to do. I take her hand, just as Mom once took mine. Come inside, I tell her. You're not alone. Inside, the circle is different yet familiar. The faces are more varied now, young and old. People facing financial ruin, heartbreak, isolation of all kinds. David is here, of course. He's talking quietly with an elderly man, but his eyes meet mine, and he gives a slight nod towards Sarah. He sees it too. I guide Sarah to a seat and bring her tea. She doesn't speak at first, just listens as others share their struggles. Then, haltingly, she begins her own story. A failed business, a broken trust, the terrifying weight of single motherhood. After the meeting, David approaches. He doesn't offer pity. He offers a business card. My friend runs a daycare, he says. She's looking for reliable help. The hours are flexible. He then turns to me. Catherine, didn't you say the library needs a part-time assistant for the children's section? I nod, seeing where he's going. We're not just offering sympathy anymore. We're building networks, creating lifelines. This is the evolution Mom dreamed of, the circle becoming a web of mutual support. Sarah looks between us, hope warring with disbelief. You do that for me? A stranger? David's answer is simple. We were all strangers once. In the following weeks, Sarah blossoms. The daycare job gives her stability. The library job feeds her soul. She brings her daughter, Lily, to the circle, and the child's laughter becomes part of our healing soundtrack. The strongest bridges are built by those who remember what it's like to be stranded. One afternoon, Sarah finds me in the garden. I want to help, she says. I'm good with social media. I could help spread the word about the circle, reach more people like me. And so the torch passes again. Sarah starts an online community for young parents in crisis, a digital extension of our physical circle. She uses skills we don't have to reach people we couldn't. Mom's legacy adapts, grows, meets the world where it is now. I watch David kneeling in the dirt with little Lily, showing her how to press sunflower seeds into the soil. The man who once built walls now teaches a child how to make things grow. The circle widens, encompassing this new generation, this new family we've helped create from the broken pieces of the old. Sarah joins them, brushing soil from her daughter's hands. She looks at David and me, at this garden that has become her sanctuary. I never thought I'd find a family after everything fell apart, she says quietly. David stands, his knees cracking, and gives her one of his rare, full smiles. Family isn't just who you're born to, he says. It's who stands with you when the world falls down. In that moment, I feel Mom's presence so strongly it takes my breath away. Her story that began with such loss has become the foundation for this new story of hope and regeneration. Her pain has been transformed into a shelter for this young mother and child, just as it was for me, for David, for William, for everyone who has found their way to our door. The work continues, the healing spreads, the legacy lives, not as a monument to the past, but as a living, breathing, ever-evolving force for good. Today we dedicate this garden in our mother's name. The air is thick with the scent of blooming flowers and the sound of a community united. People of all ages move through the winding paths, elders from the original circle, teenagers David has mentored, young families like Sarah's who found refuge here. The plaque doesn't speak of her pain or her past, it speaks of what she built from it. Where broken things grow whole, David built the plaque himself, the letters carved with the same hands that once pointed toward a door. Sarah stands to speak, her daughter Lily holding her hand. Eleanor never met me, she begins, her voice clear and strong. But she saved me. The family she built here became my family when I had none. The hope she planted in this community became my hope when I had lost my own. She looks at David, at me, at the entire gathering. Her story taught me that our broken pieces don't have to be hidden. They can become the most beautiful part of who we are, if we have the courage to let them be seen and the heart to help others do the same. One by one, others come forward. A teenager David mentored who now runs a small workshop for kids. An elderly man whose friendship with William helped him through his own grief. Clara, who proudly announces her grandson now visits every weekend. Each testimony is a different colored thread, all weaving into the vibrant tapestry of Mom's legacy. David stands beside me, watching. He doesn't speak today. His work, his transformation, speaks for him. The garden itself is his sermon, every accessible raised bed, every sturdy bench, every safe, winding path is a testament to his silent dedication. William is here too, his arm linked with mine. He leans over and whispers, "She would have loved this. Not the plaque, but all of this." He gestures to the living, breathing community around us. This was always her dream. The most enduring memorials are not made of stone, but of stories passed from heart to heart. As the dedication ceremony ends, the garden doesn't empty. People linger. Children play near the butterfly bushes. Elders sit on the benches, sharing stories. The teenagers David taught are showing younger kids how to care for the plants. Sarah is talking with a new young mother who just arrived today, looking as lost as Sarah once did. This is the true memorial, not a static monument, but a living, breathing, ever-growing ecosystem of care and connection. Mom's story, which began with such loneliness, has become the foundation for this permanent community of belonging. David turns to me, his eyes shining with unspoken emotion. We did good, didn't we? With what she gave us. I take my brother's hand. We did, I tell him. We are. The garden is more than a tribute. It is a promise. A promise that no one in this town needs to face their darkest hours alone. A promise that redemption is always possible. A promise that a single act of courage, like a desperate woman following a mysterious letter, can ripple through time, touching generations yet unborn. As the sun begins to set, casting the garden in golden light, I feel Mom's presence not as a memory, but as a living force in every laugh, every shared story, every act of kindness that happens in this sacred space she inspired. Her journey from that dusty road to this abundant garden is complete, but the journeys that begin here, inspired by hers, are just starting. The circle is unbroken. The garden will keep growing. The legacy of love she planted will continue to bloom, season after season, story after story, forever. There are stories that end with a period, a firm and final stop. And then there are stories like ours, which end with an ellipsis, a gentle continuation that hints at forever. Years have woven themselves into the fabric of this town since my mother's passing. The garden named for her is no longer a new memorial. It is a cherished part of the town's heart, as established as the old chapel or the town square. The healing circle is simply the circle now, an institution whose origins are legend, its mission a fundamental part of Millfield's identity. I am an old woman now. The fierce energy of my middle years has mellowed into a deep, settled contentment. From this porch swing, I have a view of the entire story. David is a grandfather himself, his gentle patience a beacon for his own grandchildren. He still runs the woodworking shop at the community center, a living bridge between the past and the future. William passed peacefully to winters ago, next to a photograph of his Eleanor on the bedside table. He was ready. He had been given the impossible a second lifetime with his great love. His final words were a whisper of her name, not in grief, but in joyful anticipation. The work continues, but it is no longer my hands that do the heavy lifting. Sarah now coordinates the circle with an energy and vision that surpasses my own. Her daughter, Lily, is in university, studying social work. She calls me Grandma Catherine, and when she visits, she tells me about her dreams of starting a nonprofit, of scaling the model we built here. The seed has not just grown, it has gone to seed itself, spreading on the wind. This is the true measure of a life, not in the years you are given, but in the love you leave behind, a love that becomes a self-sustaining force, independent of your presence. I feel no sadness as I feel my own time approaching. How could I? My life was a story of being found. I was found by a mother's unwavering hope. I was found by a brother's hard-won redemption. I was found by a purpose that filled my soul. The end of one story is simply the silent space where the next one begins. I often hold my mother's quilt. The fabrics are softer now, the colors faded with time and touch. It is no longer just her story stitched there. It is mine, and David's, and William's, and Sarah's, and Lily's. It is the story of a community that learned to turn its scars into sources of strength. My breath is slower now, the sounds of the garden a bird's song. The distant laughter of children feel both incredibly vivid and very far away. I close my eyes. I am not afraid. I am going to see my mother. I am going to see William. The last thing I feel is not an ending, but a profound and seamless transition. The love that rebuilt me, that rebuilt my family, that rebuilt this little corner of the world, does not die. It simply returns to the source from which it came, a wave merging back into a boundless, eternal ocean. And in the silent, sacred space that follows, a new story is already beginning to whisper.